Take a slow breath in and let it out. The day is ending now. The world is quieting down. And together, we will take a gentle journey into history. This is not the noisy history of battles and kings. This is the quiet story of a root, a humble root that would reshape a continent. Before the potato, Europe was fragile. Fields of wheat, barley, and rye swayed in the wind. But they were delicate. Too much rain, and they drowned. Too little rain, and they cracked in the soil. A sudden frost, and the harvest was gone. Families lived close to hunger. When crops were good, there was bread on the table. Soups simmered slowly. Fires burned warm. Children laughed. But when crops failed, bread grew thin, and laughter grew quiet. It was a life lived on the edge of hunger. A life where every season was a gamble. And then, from far away, something new arrived. It did not look like much. Not golden like wheat. Not fragrant like bread. It was round and rough, sometimes knobbly, sometimes smooth. It hid beneath the earth, patient and silent. This was the potato, small, humble, and yet powerful. Within it lay the strength to feed millions, to reshape societies, to alter the destiny of Europe itself. But before it could change Europe, it had to make a journey, across oceans, across centuries, across doubt and suspicion. For now, imagine Europe before it knew the potato. A small village, thatched roofs, wooden beams, smoke rising gently from chimneys. Inside, a family gathered. On their table, bread, cheese, perhaps an onion from the garden. A simple meal. They eat slowly, carefully, hoping it will be enough. When the harvests were kind, there was food. When the harvests failed, there was hunger. Always, the shadow of famine waited. And then, slowly, quietly, a new food would arrive. One that could grow in poor soil. One that could survive storms. One that could fill the pot and fill the belly. The family does not know yet. The village does not know yet. But this root will change their world. It will change villages. It will change nations. It will change Europe. And so, let us drift into the story. Let us travel back far from Europe into the high mountains of South America, where the potato was born and where its long, quiet journey began. Part 2, the potato's ancient roots in the Andes. Far away from Europe, long before ships crossed the oceans, long before kings and scholars argued about strange new foods, there were mountains, the Andes, high, vast, ancient, mountains that touched the clouds, mountains where the air was thin and the stars at night seemed close enough to touch. Here, the potato was born. In the cool soil of those mountains, in valleys carved by rivers and time, farmers of the Andes learned to plant and harvest this root. They had known it for thousands of years. They gave it names. They gave it rituals. They treated it not just as food, but as a companion in life. Imagine the terraces carved into the slopes, step by step, stairways of earth and stone. On each step, green plants grew, leaves reaching toward the sun, roots swelling quietly in the dark soil below. This was the potato's first home. The Inca people, and those before them, knew its secrets well. They knew how to plant it with the seasons. They knew how to store it in pits, cool and dry, where it could last through winter nights. They even learned to freeze it in the high cold air, making a food called chuno, light, dry, and long-lasting, a gift from the mountains. For them, the potato was not humble. It was sacred. It was woven into their daily life, into their stories, into their survival. It gave strength for farming, strength for building, strength for walking the steep mountain paths. Picture an Andean village. The houses are built of stone. Smoke rises from hearths. Children play among the llamas and alpacas. And in the kitchens, pots simmer with potatoes, boiled, roasted, mashed into stews. The taste is earthy, warm, grounding, the kind of food that feels like home. Above them, the mountains watched, silent, eternal, guardians of the potato. The Incas believed the potato was a gift from the gods. And so, when they planted, they prayed. When they harvested, they gave thanks. Each potato was part of a cycle of soil, water, sun, and spirit. For centuries, this was enough. The potato fed villages, kingdoms, empires. It did not need Europe. It had its place here, in the Andes. But time is always moving. The world is always shifting. And soon, ships from far away would arrive. Curious eyes would look upon this route. And slowly, quietly, its journey would begin. Still, before it left, let us stay a little longer in the Andes. Imagine walking along a high path. The wind is cool. The sky is endless. Below you, terraces step down into the valley. The fields are full of potato plants. Their flowers are pale, soft purple, white, or pink. Simple, delicate, yet each one a promise of food below. You reach down, brush the soil aside, and there it is. Potato, round, firm, waiting. The farmer smiles, for he knows this is life. This is survival. This is the earth's quiet gift. Night falls on the Andes. The stars are brighter here than anywhere else. Families gather by firelight. They share stories. They share potatoes roasted in the embers. The skin crackling, the inside soft and steaming. Simple, comforting, timeless. Generations pass. The potato remains, always beneath the soil, always giving, always patient. And then change comes. The world beyond the Andes is stirring. Explorers arrive on ships, seeking gold, silver, and spices. But they find something else, something unexpected. They find the potato. At first, they do not understand it. It seems strange. It grows beneath the ground. It does not shine like gold. It does not smell sweet like spice. And yet, it is food. Steady, filling, nourishing. Quietly, the potato begins its long journey, leaving the mountains of its birth to travel across the sea. Its destiny is changing. The story is widening. Soon it will step into Europe's fragile fields. And there, it will reshape history. But in the Andes, its memory remains. The terraces still hold it. The farmers still plant it. The old rituals still honor it. For though the potato traveled far, it never left its first home. And so, as we rest here, in the quiet mountains, we honor the beginning of the story, a story rooted in the earth, a story patient and humble, the story of the potato. Now, let us follow it, across the oceans, across time, into the heart of Europe, where its true power would at last be revealed. Part 3: The Arrival in Europe. The journey was long, the sea was wide, and the potato silent and patient as always, traveled across the waves. It was carried aboard the great wooden ships of Spain, ships heavy with silver, ships carrying treasures and hopes and fears. Among them, hidden in sacks or stored in crates, were small, knobbly roots, potatoes. They had left the high mountains of the Andes. They had left the people who first gave them meaning. Now, they had entered a new world, Europe. Imagine the first moment. A potato lifted from a crate, its skin still dusty from South American soil, held up to the light by curious eyes, turned over in the hand, as if to ask, "What is this? What shall we do with it?" In Spain, in Italy, the potato was shown to nobles, scholars, and priests. It was unlike anything they had seen. It was not golden like grain. It was not fragrant like spice. It was plain, humble, earthy, and so many dismissed it. Some said it was food fit only for animals. Others whispered it might be dangerous, strange, even poisonous, for it belonged to the same plant family as deadly nightshade, and suspicion lingered. The potato waited, silent, patient, as it always had. Europe in the 16th century was a place of beauty and struggle. Great palaces and cathedrals rose high, but beyond their walls, peasants worked hard in the fields. Fields of wheat and rye, fields of barley and oats, crops that could feed, but could also fail. One storm, one frost, and the table was empty. So the potato, though mistrusted, had something to offer. It grew underground, safe from winds. It needed less land, could yield much more than grain, but still, people hesitated. Change comes slowly. Imagine the kitchens of the time. Large hearths glowing with fire, pots filled with stews of beans, onions, bread thickened with broth. A potato placed beside them might have seemed strange, unwelcome even, yet in a quiet corner, some tried, boiled it, roasted it, tasted it, and discovered it was filling, comforting, steady. Step by step, little by little, the potato began to spread. Not loudly, not quickly, but quietly, patiently, as it had always lived. In Spain, it was grown in gardens, sometimes in monasteries. In Italy, it appeared as a curiosity. In France, it was offered to scholars and apothecaries. And in Ireland, it found its truest early home. The soil was good, the climate was kind, the potato grew strong, and people began to notice. Still, for a long while, the potato was seen as odd, a food for the poor, a food for livestock, rarely honored, rarely celebrated, but quietly beneath the soil, it was working its slow magic. Picture a farmer in Northern Europe. The year has been harsh, the rains too heavy, the wheat fields have drowned, but in a small patch of earth, hidden below the mud, the potato has survived. He digs into the soil, he pulls out the roots, he feeds his family, and they live. That was the gift the potato offered. Not glory, not splendor, but survival. Quiet, steady, reliable survival. In courts and palaces, nobles still doubted it. But in humble cottages, families learned to trust it. To cook it slowly in pots, to roast it in ashes, to mash it into stews, to share it at the table. And as they ate, they felt its strength, its nourishment, its quiet promise. By the early 1600s, the potato had found its way across Spain, Italy, France, and Ireland. By the 1700s, it had begun to spread wider, from gardens to farms, from curiosity to necessity, still slowly, still quietly, but the change was underway. It is strange, is it not, how something so small, so humble, can take so long to be seen for what it truly is? Yet the potato never hurried, simply grew, as it always had, as it always would. And so, the potato, once hidden in the mountains of the Andes, was now hidden in the soils of Europe, waiting, patient, ready to shape the centuries to come. Part 4. The Peasant's Friend. The potato was never proud. It did not shine like gold. It did not boast like wine. It did not carry the fragrance of spices. It was simple. It was plain. It was quiet. And so, it belonged not to the palaces, but to the cottages. In the small homes of Europe's poor, where the fire was low and the meals were meager, the potato began to find its place. Imagine a peasant family. Their home is made of wood and clay. The roof is thatched. The floor is earthen. There is little inside, but the fire is warm. The table is rough, but it is where the family gathers. And now, upon that table, pot simmers with potatoes, boiled until soft, mashed into a simple stew, perhaps with cabbage, or onion, or nothing more than salt. Still, it is enough. It fills the belly. It brings comfort. It gives strength for another day. For peasants, the potato was more than food. It was survival. It grew in poor soil. It grew in small patches. It grew even when wheat failed. A single plot of land, barely enough for grain, could produce many sacks of potatoes, enough to feed a family through the winter, enough to keep hunger at bay. And so, slowly, gently, the potato spread, not because nobles commanded it, not because kings praised it, but because the people, the farmers, the poor, found it useful, found it kind, found it steady. Picture the fields of northern Europe. The soil is dark, damp, and heavy. Grain does not grow well here, but potatoes, they thrive. Beneath the soil, unseen, they swell, hidden, patient, safe from storms. When the harvest comes, families dig with their hands. One potato, then another, then many more. They fill baskets, they fill sacks, they fill cellars, and with each one, the family breathes easier. They will not go hungry this winter. In Ireland, especially, the potato became beloved. The soil was kind to it. The rains were plentiful. From small plots of land, families could harvest enough to live. Year after year, generation after generation, the potato became their daily bread, their comfort, their strength. Elsewhere, too, it spread, across Germany, across Russia, across Poland and beyond. Peasants took it into their lives, first with caution, then with trust, and finally with dependence. Imagine a winter evening. Snow lies heavy outside. The wind howls, but inside, the fire glows. On the hearth, potatoes roast in the embers. Their skins crackle. Their flesh turns soft. A child reaches for one. It is hot to the touch, but warm in the heart. She bites, and the taste is earthy, comforting, filling. Her hunger fades. She smiles, and her parents smile too. The potato has given them peace tonight. In quiet ways, the potato was transforming life. Where once people lived on the edge of hunger, now they had a safety net. Where once they feared every storm, now they had a root that waited beneath the soil. Where once famine was common, now survival became steadier. The potato did not end hardship, but it softened it. It gave resilience. It gave hope. And so the potato became the friend of the peasant, not honored in songs, not praised in poems, but remembered in kitchens, cherished in gardens, trusted in hard times. It was a quiet revolution, a revolution beneath the soil, a revolution that grew potato by potato, field by field, family by family. The world did not notice at first, but soon it would, because the potato, so small, so humble, was beginning to reshape Europe itself. One village at a time, one meal at a time, one quiet evening by the fire. And as it spread, so too spread its power, not loud, not sudden, but slow, patient, unstoppable. The way it had always lived, the way it always would, Part 5: A Changing Europe. The potato began as a stranger. It entered quietly, it sat in the soil waiting, and little by little, it became a friend. But soon its friendship grew wider, beyond the cottage, beyond the small farm, beyond the village. The potato began to change entire nations. Europe had always known hunger. It had always known the thin edge of famine. But with the potato, the edge softened. The knife of hunger grew duller. People began to eat more steadily. Children began to grow stronger. Families began to survive the winters more easily. And so, slowly, almost without notice, the population of Europe began to rise. Imagine a small village. In one generation, there are 20 families. In the next, 30. In the next, 50. Each generation living a little longer. Each generation raising more children. Each generation made steadier by the potato. It was not magic. It was not sudden. It was steady, quiet, like the potato itself. In cities, too, the change was felt. More food meant more workers. More workers meant larger towns. And larger towns became cities. Factories rose. Markets expanded. Ships sailed farther. Behind it all, in the kitchens, in the fields, in the soil, the potato gave strength. The potato gave energy. The potato gave life. Think of it this way. A single acre of wheat could feed a few people, but a single acre of potatoes could feed many more. And so land went further, food stretched further, and populations grew further. Scholars have looked back and wondered, would Europe's rise have been possible without the potato? Would its armies have marched? Would its cities have swelled? Would its people have multiplied? Perhaps not, for the potato carried silent power. Not the power of kings, not the power of armies, but the power of nourishment, the power of survival, the power of growth. Imagine again a family at their table. Years ago, they might have had only bread, and very little of it. Now, with potatoes, the meal is larger. The children eat until they are full. They sleep more peacefully. They wake with more energy. They grow taller. They live longer. This small change, repeated in thousands of homes, became a great change. A change for all of Europe. The potato also brought resilience. Storms might still come, wheat might still fail, but potatoes, hidden beneath the earth, often endured. They were insurance. They were protection. They were a shield against despair. And in this shield, society found strength. Farmers could risk planting new crops. Families could risk having more children. Villages could risk growing into towns. The potato made the ground beneath them steadier, the future brighter. And so, by the 1700s, Europe was changing. Populations were rising. Cities were swelling. Nations were becoming stronger. And quietly, beneath it all, the potato was there, silent, steady, humble, but essential. It is easy to overlook, to forget, to imagine history as the story of kings and battles. But sometimes, history is written by what grows beneath the soil, by what fills the pot, by what warms the belly, by what helps a child grow. The potato was not just food, it was transformation. It was the quiet engine of Europe's growth. It was the unseen hand shaping families of villages, nations. And so, the humble potato, the peasant's friend, became more than a friend. It became the foundation of a changing Europe. But even as it brought life, there were new challenges to come. For the potato's strength was also its weakness. As people came to depend on it, they grew vulnerable when it failed. That part of the story is still ahead. But for now, let us rest in this moment of growth. This time when the potato gave strength, and Europe began to rise. Part 6. The potato in war and peace. Wars have always been part of Europe's story. Armies marching, cities burning, fields left bare, and through it all, the people still needed to eat. Bread was the food of soldiers. Grain was the treasure of kings. But grain could be burned. Fields of wheat could be trampled. Supplies could be stolen. Hunger often marched alongside war. The potato was different. Hidden beneath the earth, it was harder to destroy. A burning army might torch a field, but the potatoes still waited safe in the soil. And when the flames died, when the soldiers moved on, the villagers could dig. And there, like a gift, the food remained. This gave the potato a special power in times of war. Protected families, fed survivors. It softened the cruelty of hunger. Rulers began to notice. Commanders began to rely on it. In some countries, armies were supplied with potatoes. Boiled, roasted, mashed. They filled the bellies of soldiers. Simple food, but steady food. The kind that could be carried. The kind that gave strength. Think of the soldiers marching across muddy roads. Their packs heavy, their weapons sharp, but their stomachs grumbling. And then, in the evening, a pot of potatoes is shared. Steam rises. The smell is earthy, comforting. Each bite gives warmth. Each bite gives strength. The march will go on. The battle will come. And the potato will be part of their endurance. In Prussia, in Austria, in Russia, leaders encouraged the planting of potatoes, sometimes even forcing it, not always with kindness, but always with purpose. For the potato could feed an army, and armies could decide the fate of nations. Even Napoleon's wars felt the touch of the potato. When food was scarce, when the land was empty, potatoes filled the gaps. They kept soldiers marching. They kept battles possible. Quietly, beneath the noise of war, the potato played its part. But the potato was not only a food of war. It was also a food of peace. In peaceful times, it nourished the poor. It helped towns grow. It supported new industries. It gave families the freedom to live more steadily. And so, whether the world was at war or at peace, the potato remained constant, a quiet companion, steady friend, never demanding attention, never seeking glory, only giving, always giving. Imagine again a quiet village. War has passed through. Fields are empty, homes are broken, but in the ground, the potatoes remain. The people dig them up, they cook them over the fire, and slowly, they begin again. The potato becomes the first step toward recovery, toward peace, toward hope. It is strange, perhaps, to think of something so small, so ordinary, as shaping wars and shaping peace. But history is not only written in battles. It is written in kitchens. It is written in gardens. It is written in the meals that keep people alive, when everything else has been lost. And so, in war and in peace, the potato endured, carried soldiers through battles, carried peasants through winters, carried Europe through change. A small root with great strength, a quiet force with endless patience. Part 7. The Irish Love Affair. Ireland, a land of green fields, rolling hills and soft rains. A land where the soil is rich and the climate gentle. A land that once struggled to feed its people, but then found a quiet companion beneath the earth. The potato. When the potato first arrived in Ireland, it seemed like any other curiosity. A new plant, a strange root. Some were cautious, some were doubtful. But slowly, gently, the potato found a home here, and in time, Ireland and the potato became inseparable. Why Ireland? Why here more than anywhere else? The soil of Ireland was kind to the potato. The rains were steady, the climate cool but not too cold. The potato thrived. And unlike wheat or barley, the potato gave much from little. Even a small plot of land could produce food for a whole family. For poor Irish families, this was a blessing. Many had only tiny farms, small pieces of land to live on. Not enough for grain, not enough for herds, but enough for potatoes. And so, the potato became the daily bread of Ireland, boiled in a pot, served plain with nothing more than salt, or perhaps a little milk, or butter when there was some. Simple food, but filling food. Food that gave strength for the long days of work. Food that nourished children. Food that kept families alive. Imagine a cottage in the Irish countryside. The walls are stone. The roof is thatched. Smoke rises from the chimney. Inside, a pot boils gently over the fire. Inside the pot, potatoes. The family gathers round. A father, a mother, children of many ages. Each receives their portion. Steam rises. The smell is earthy. The taste is plain. But it is enough. It is life. The potato gave Ireland something more than food. It gave security. It gave resilience. It gave families the confidence to grow. And so the population of Ireland rose, year after year, from village to village, from county to county. By the early 1800s, Ireland's people had more than doubled, and much of that growth rested on the potato. There was love in this bond, for the people cherished the potato. It was dependable. It was generous. It asked for little, but gave so much. It became not just food, but the heart of daily life. Breakfast, dinner, supper, all built around the potato. A rhythm of life, steady and strong. But love can also bring dependence. And in this love, there was danger. For Ireland grew to rely almost entirely on the potato. Other crops were scarce. Other foods were too costly. For the poor, the potato was not just part of the diet. It was the diet, the one thing that kept them alive. This bond, so nourishing, so comforting, was also fragile. For what would happen if the potato should fail? For now, though, in the early days, the potato was Ireland's blessing. It filled the fields, it filled the pots, it filled the lives of the people. It gave strength to the nation. It gave Ireland its greatest growth. Families grew larger, children survived longer, villages thrived, songs were sung, stories were told by the fire, and always the potato was there, silent, steady, patient, like the land itself. To the Irish, the potato was more than a crop. It was kin. It was a friend. It was part of the family. Every harvest was a festival. Every meal was a quiet prayer of gratitude. Every child who grew strong was a living sign of its gift. The bond was deep. The bond was powerful. The bond was absolute. And in that absolute love, the seeds of sorrow were planted. For no love, no crop is invincible. And one day, the potato would betray them, not out of malice, not out of choice, but out of weakness, a weakness that would bring Ireland to its knees. But before we reach that part of the story, let us rest here, in this time of plenty, when the potato was Ireland's treasure. When the land was green, the pots were full, and the people were strong. The Irish love affair with the potato was beautiful, it was tender, it was life-giving, but like all great love stories, carried both joy and tragedy, both laughter and tears, and both are part of the tale. Part 8, The Great Hunger. The story of love can also become a story of loss. And in Ireland, the potato, once a friend, once a savior, became the cause of the greatest sorrow the land had ever known. It began in the year 1845. The summer had been kind. The fields were rich with green leaves. The potato crop looked strong as it always had. Families looked forward to the harvest. Children dreamed of full pots and warm meals. The people felt safe. But then, something strange appeared. Dark spots on the leaves. A withering, a rot. The plants collapsed as if sick. When the farmers dug into the earth, the potatoes were soft, black, ruined. The food was gone. It was a blight, a disease that swept across the fields. It spread fast, spared nothing. The potatoes, the very heart of Ireland's food, were destroyed. At first, people hoped it was only one bad season, that the next year would be better. But when the next year came, the blight returned, and the next, and the next. For years, the potatoes failed. The fields that once promised life now whispered only death. Imagine a small cottage. A family gathers round the fire. The pot is empty. The children cry. The parents have nothing to give. Outside, the field lies dark. The leaves are dead. The earth holds no gift. The potato is gone. Hunger spread, first through villages, then through towns, then across the whole of Ireland. The famine had begun. The great hunger. Families grew desperate. They ate whatever they could find. Grass, roots, shellfish gathered from the shore. But it was not enough. Hunger gnawed at every home. Weakness grew. Sickness followed. And soon death. It is said that 1 million souls were lost in those years. Men, women, children. Whole families vanished. Whole villages emptied. The land was filled with silence. The silence of hunger. The silence of grief. And those who did not die often left. They sailed across the sea. To America. To Canada. To Australia. To anywhere that might hold food and hope. The ships were crowded. The journeys long. Some survived. Some did not. But the Irish people scattered, and the world was forever changed. The famine was not only nature's work. It was also a wound deepened by politics. The poor depended on potatoes, but other foods, grains, livestock still left Ireland exported away. Ships of food sailed out, while families starved at home. It was a cruel contrast, one that added anger to sorrow. And so, the great hunger was more than famine. It was tragedy. It was injustice. It was heartbreak. It was the moment when Ireland's love for the potato was betrayed. Imagine once more a field in summer. Long ago, it was full of green potato plants. Children ran between the rows. Families smiled at the promise of plenty. Now, the field is bare. The plants are blackened. No children play. Only silence. Only sorrow. The famine lasted for years. From 1845 to 1852. Year after year of hunger. Year after year of loss. By the end, Ireland was changed forever. Its population had fallen by millions. Through death, through exile, through despair. The scars never faded. They are remembered still. The Great Hunger was a turning point. It showed both the power and the peril of the potato. It had given life. It had raised nations. But in its failure, it brought death. It brought collapse. It brought grief beyond measure. And yet, even in sorrow, the potato did not vanish from Ireland. When the blight eased, when the fields slowly healed, families planted again, carefully, fearfully, but also hopefully. For though it had betrayed them, the potato was still their food, still their companion, still the root that bound them to the soil. The bond was never the same, but it was never broken, for Ireland and the potato were tied together by history, by love, by grief, and the story of that bond is part of the story of Europe itself. Part 9 Beyond Ireland. The famine in Ireland was a wound, a deep scar on a nation, but the story of the potato did not end there. It reached further, touched other places, other people, other histories. Across Europe, the potato had already proven its worth. In Germany, in Russia, in Poland, it was a steady friend. In times of hunger, it softened the blow. In times of peace, it nourished the poor. It became a root not only of survival, but of growth. In Prussia, rulers had once ordered their people to plant potatoes. At first, the peasants resisted. They were suspicious of the strange crop. But over time, they too learned to trust it. And soon, the potato became part of their fields, part of their tables, part of their lives. In Russia, the potato spread slowly, but steadily. It became food for peasants across vast lands. Boiled, baked, turned into stews, it became a quiet companion in the cold, a source of strength when the winters were long, a comfort when other foods were scarce. Across Europe, wherever it went, the potato gave something the people needed most. Not luxury, not delicacy, but certainty, reliability, a crop that could be counted on. And beyond Europe, the potato crossed oceans again. It reached North America. It reached Asia. It reached the far corners of the world. Everywhere it traveled, found new soil, new homes, new people to feed. In the Americas, where it had first been born, it returned, but in new ways. Not as a sacred crop of the Andes, but as a global food. It spread across the United States. It grew in Canada. It filled tables far from its original mountain home. And in time, it became one of the most beloved foods of the modern world. But Europe remained the heart of its great transformation. Here, the potato had changed the very fabric of life. It had fed armies. It had grown cities. It had raised populations. It had broken and rebuilt nations. Beyond Ireland, the potato had become a symbol of survival, a symbol of resilience, a symbol of how something so humble, so small, so overlooked, could shape the destiny of entire peoples. And so, in quiet fields from Russia to Spain, from Poland to France, the potato continued to grow, season after season, generation after generation, feeding millions, sustaining lives, carrying forward its quiet legacy. It was no longer a stranger, no longer a curiosity, no longer a food met with suspicion. It was family, it was tradition, it was home. And as Europe moved into the modern age, through revolutions, through empires, through change, the potato remained, silent, steady, waiting beneath the soil, always there when needed, always giving. The story of the potato had begun in the mountains of Peru, but by now, it had become the story of the world, a root without borders, a food without end, a quiet gift from the earth to all who would receive it. Part 10: The Legacy of the Potato. The story of the potato is the story of humility, of something small, something quiet, changing the course of history. It began high in the Andes, where ancient peoples first nurtured it. They learned its secrets, they honored its strength, they carried it through seasons and across centuries. It journeyed across oceans to a continent that did not know it. At first, it was mistrusted, ignored, dismissed, a strange root with no place at the table. But slowly, gently, found its way into homes, into kitchens, into the hearts of the people. And once it did, it never left. The potato did not conquer with force. It did not rule with power. It shaped the world in quieter ways, by filling bellies, by sustaining children, by carrying families through winters and through wars. It fed peasants in their cottages. It marched with soldiers in their campaigns. It sat in the cellars of cities. It traveled on ships across seas. It was there, always there, a root beneath the soil, a friend to the hungry. It brought growth. It brought resilience. It brought change. It helped Europe rise, not only through kings and empires, but through the survival of its people, through the quiet strength of nourishment. And yet, the potato also carried sorrow. In Ireland, it gave life, and then, in its failure, it brought hunger, scattered millions, carved grief into the land. The Great Hunger remains one of history's deepest wounds. And still, it is remembered. Still, it is mourned. So the legacy of the potato is not simple. It is both blessing and warning. It shows us the power of a single crop, the hope it can bring, and the danger of depending too much on it. Today, the potato is everywhere. It is boiled. It is baked. It is mashed. It is fried. It sits on tables across the world. From the simplest home to the grandest feast, from the child's first solid food to the comfort meal of the old, the potato endures. It is no longer a curiosity, no longer a stranger. It is family. It is tradition. It is memory. It is the quiet reminder of how history is shaped, not only by kings and battles, but by the humble gifts of the earth. And so, when you see a potato on your plate, in your kitchen, in the soil of a field, you are also seeing history, the story of nations, the story of survival, the story of how something so small could change so much. The potato's legacy is the legacy of life itself, silent, patient, enduring, always waiting beneath the soil to be discovered again. And perhaps That is the lesson it leaves us with, that history is not only in the noise. It is not only in the crowns or the swords or the songs. It is also in the quiet, in the small, in the unnoticed, in the humble roots that sustain us. The potato shaped Europe, and in shaping Europe, it shaped the world. Now, the story rests, like the potato itself, sleeping beneath the earth, waiting, always waiting, until it is needed once more.